Hi, I'm Howie Rose, and my guest today is one of the best relief pitchers the Mets had for a long, long time, going back into the 1980s and the late 1970s. Neil Allen, nice to see you again. It's been a long time.
Thank you very much.
You may or may not have got a feel for this back in the day, but from the moment Tom Seaver was traded in 1977, whenever a young pitcher showed any promise in the Mets organization, someone, very often it was Jack Lang, would write in the paper, "Is so-and-so the next Tom Seaver?" Well, the year that you had your breakthrough at Lynchburg was the year that Seaver was traded. Did any of that next Tom Seaver talk ever filter down to you?
No, you're talking about a superstar legend, and no, it never even.
Because he did
filtered through
write
my
that,
mind.
by the way. I'm not making this up.
No, I was just a kid that was happy to be having some success in Lynchburg, Virginia, and just all I was worried about was trying to get off the buses and get to New York and get on airplanes. I didn't care how I did it. I didn't care, names involved or any of that type of stuff. When you're a young kid and you're an A-ball, you're just trying to find success to someday get the opportunity to make it to the major leagues.
And you did have a lot of success, in particular that year at Lynchburg, and a couple of years later, now you're a young pitcher in the major leagues with the New York Mets. You came through the organization as a starter. And very early on in your major league career, they said to you, I think you'd be a better fit in the bullpen. How did that happen?
Well, they didn't really say that. It's just that I made myself a short starter, 2 1/3, 3 1/3, and it was that time that we had some injuries out in the bullpen, and I was probably going to be sent back to Tidewater, in all honesty, and I had a lot to learn, and I knew that. Well, we had some injuries, and instead of sending me down, they sent me to the bullpen to try to work out some things. As time goes on, Joe and everybody decided that this is where he needs to be. And
Joe Torre, of course.
yes, Joe Torre. And as time went on, Rube come and talk to me a lot. Rube Walker would come and talk to me a lot about it, how I like the bullpen, am I comfortable? And, a lot of people look at the bullpen as a demotion. If you keep your eyes open, the bullpen has saved more careers over the years, and it saved my career. I didn't have a third pitch. I was a fastball, curveball guy. I was a guy that just basically, young kid, threw hard, and here it comes. And you can't be a major league pitcher like that. And that's what I had to learn. So really, in reality, you could go to the bullpen with 2 pitches. And so it was a blessing in disguise, the bullpen, for me. A lot of people take it as a demotion. For me, it saved my career.
And the role of the reliever was just beginning to change then. The Mets had Tug McGraw, who had established himself as really their, quote, closer, because it really wasn't used as a term back then. And then, of course, some others came along, and when you joined the Mets, they still had a pretty good relief pitcher in Skip Lockwood, who'd been a veteran. Was he any kind of an influence on your transition to the bullpen and helping you in that role?
Skip did talk to me. He would sit me down, talk to me, and tell me about how to warm up, because it was a night and day. It's a different way of doing things, because you may get up 2, 3 times in a night sometimes. And you get up as a young kid, you got energy, you're 21 years old, you're going to crank it every time. Well, you've already thrown a full game if you get up and let it go. So he taught me how to warm up. He talked to me about those things, how to pace yourself, know the situation of the game, know who's on deck, know who's in the hole, know who you may be facing, you may not be, all those kind of things. These are the things he talked to me about, because I knew nothing about the bullpen. And Skip, of course, was the veteran guy out there, and he was the guy that had done it for years. And so he really took me under his wing in that regard and taught me an awful lot about how to warm up and how to prepare yourself to be a reliever.
And in retrospect, it was an interesting group that you broke in with in the late 70s, because the Mets were not a very good team in those days after the trades of Seaver and Kingman had kind of decimated the roster systematically. And so you had some veteran players who were just kind of winding down their careers, and young players like yourself who were, very impressionable, I'm sure, as major league youngsters. Who kind of took you under his wing, or who did you look to as someone to emulate to kind of get you through whatever challenges there were in pitching for a team that wasn't expected to or going to win a whole lot of games early on?
Well, yeah, I think I kind of learned and kind of watched the guys that had been around a little bit. Craig Swan was one that was kind of a veteran pitcher that we had here. Pat Zachary, who we got for Tom Seaver from the Cincinnati Reds. There was just guys like that I kind of watched. Of course, Skip Lockwood. People that had been around, how they go about their business, when they go work out, how they work out, how their routine is. I didn't know what a routine was. All I knew is you went out and you played catch, you got your arm loose, and you went to bullpen. Well, these are things I had to learn. When do I do my running? How much do I run? Do I pitch tonight? If I don't pitch tonight, do I stretch it out a little bit more? These are the things that I had to learn from Skip Lockwood. And Craig Swan, couldn't do his routine, but I would watch how he acted as a professional, how he handled himself around the locker room, how he handled himself in the dugout. You just kind of keep your eyes on these guys, and you put a little bit of this and a little bit of that in there. And I guess you could say it's kind of like making soup. You just put a little of that and a little of that because you got to learn from each individual. You don't just lock in on one because there's so many things for you to learn, and there's so much out there that if you can pick guys' brains and go over here and go over here, everybody's got a little bit to add to it. And so it wasn't just one specific guy, but it was mostly the veteran type guys that I had around me at that particular time that I would keep an eye on all the time about how to prepare myself.
Did any of them tell you, okay, here's an idea. When you come into a game to relieve, throw the first one to the backstop and shake the other guys up? Because you did that more than a couple of times. How did you adopt that as something of a signature?
Because we were playing one night in Houston, and there was a guy named Jose Cruz was on deck, and he was getting ready to hit.
A good hitter, left-handed.
Very good hitter, and he owned me. A lot of people did, but he owned me. But anyway, he was standing there, and he was watching me warm up, and I went to throw a pitch, and so I stumbled or something, and I threw it in the mezzanine in the Houston Astrodome. And he looked, and I kind of saw his face kind of like looking at me. And then I threw another one off the screen a little bit higher, and then he looked at that too.
Well, wait, now, was the second one on purpose?
Oh yeah, the second one was on purpose, but the catcher couldn't reach it. It was at the top of the screen, almost could go up the mezzanine screen again. And I saw Cruz's face kind of like that, and I'm thinking, and the bases were loaded, and I was coming in, and I remember I got to get this guy out, and he owned me. And I just told myself, maybe I can make him uncomfortable. So I threw another one off the screen there, and I saw his face. Sure enough, I got him out, and we got out of it. So from that time on, I would just let one fly every once in a while and just kind of get the guy on deck's response, see what their faces look like.
So you look in that on-deck circle when you did that to see if they might have been intimidated or puzzled or whatever?
And plus, if it's a guy that you know has had success against you, I would just do it to do it. Rick Mundy from the Los Angeles Dodgers, another guy that hit me pretty good because he loved fastballs, and I threw a lot of them. And I had to learn that down the road, that you can't be throwing Rick Mundy fastballs all the time. But these are the things that we were talking about earlier with Skip and Craig Swan and Zachary and those kind of guys talking to me about different things. But like I would see Rick Mundy up there, and I wouldn't let one fly at Dodger Stadium. But Rick Mundy wasn't bothered. Rick Mundy would get right back up there and say, "I know what you're doing, kid," and he would whack it somewhere. So it would come and go. Maybe I would throw one, maybe I wouldn't throw one, depending who was on deck.
You know what, though? Just your reaction, the fact that you're kind of laughing about this now, takes me back to that period when, as you got more and more established as a major league, and now you're into the early 80s, 80, 81, 82, and that was a primarily young team that really seemed to like being with each other. I mean, that group seem to have a lot of fun. Are there any of those particular hijinks that you still think about all these years later?
We always had fun. I mean, we
Well, who are you
weren't.
closest to, and who'd you have the most fun with?
We're going back a lot of years right now. I had a lot of fun with Jeff Reardon. I had a lot of fun with Jesse Orosco.
Which is interesting, because those guys could have been considered real rivals of yours, the way things played out.
But we all came through the system together, and we were friends. We were friends before we were major leaguers, and I think that our friendship went so deep that all we wanted to do was win when we got here. And we wanted to stay in the major leagues. We saw how nice it was, the life and everything like that. None of us wanted to go back. And really what we did was we kind of pushed each other, is what we did, because we all learned how to be a little bit more professional the longer we were here. But when you first arrive and you're 21 years old and you think you get all the answers, there's so much to learn. And I had so much to learn. I was immature, had so many things to learn. We all did. But we were all kind of from the same mold. We all kind of had similar stuff. Jesse, of course, was left-handed. But we all threw relatively hard. We all had decent breaking balls, maybe above average a little bit. But we all pulled for each other. We came through the minors for each other. We were all starters in the minors. And we were all just friends. We were friends way before we were major leaguers. And when we all arrived, we weren't major league pitchers. We had to learn to be major league pitchers. We had the arm, we had the stuff, we had the capability. Not always had the mind, but we learned and kind of grew up as we went along together.
And it's easy to forget because it's been a while now, but you mentioned names like Jeff Reardon, Jesse Orosco, guys who are on the same staff. You don't see many relievers, the three of you, with that caliber arm and ultimate success who wind up pitching for the same club early in your careers. And at an early stage, you guys got a tiny taste, as I remember, in 1980, which was the year that the ownership changed and there was a lot of new energy in the organization. And you had some series against the West Coast teams, the Giants and the Dodgers, where you won some games dramatically in 1980. And then you had a series with the Expos around July 4th that year, where there were fireworks on the field and off the field as well. I know you were only around 500, but you were within shouting distance of first place. Did you guys sort of feel pennant race energy that early in your careers, even though it didn't play out that way ultimately?
I know when you were talking about, and we were very confident that we could get it done because we were being challenged to, some of the best clubs in baseball at the time, and we were giving them all they wanted, and we were seeing that we could win a game here and there. And in '79 that wasn't the case. We were getting beat up every which way you could in '79. So I think that it was a point in time that we were all starting to kind of believe in ourselves a little bit, that maybe we can do this. And did we think about winning the East or anything like that? No, we were just thinking about continuing to be who we were. And and I remember Joe Torre, matter of fact, he called me in and he would even talk to me, and he'd talk to Reardon, he'd talk to Jet, he'd talk to all of us because we were all young, and he'd catch us in the hallway and he goes, long season. This thing's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And he goes, you all pace yourselves. I'll be good to you guys in the bullpen. You be good to me. And what I mean by that is don't get ahead of yourselves. And we were young, and we had to be, nourished along like that. And that's what Joe Torre did for us as a manager. He had a lot of young guys that had potential, but we had so much to learn about being a pro and how to learn to cope with the situation that we were coming into to have a little success. How are they going to handle this? And Joe would keep us grounded in that regard.
Well, you obviously made an impression on Joe Torre because later in your career, after your playing days were over, you wound up working for Joe when he was managing the Yankees. You were a bullpen coach. How did that connection stay in place after all those years that led you back to Joe Torre?
Well, I was with, at the time I was with the Toronto Blue Jays and I was coaching, and Billy Connors come and asked me if I'd be interested in making a switch. And I said, I don't know, but anyway, long story short, I did make the switch to the Yankees. And I was in their farm system for quite some time with Billy Connors and with Joe Torre as the manager. And I just kind of worked my way up the ladder with them and went about my business. But Joe would come and see us over in spring training. The big leaguers would come over to pitch in minor league games and stuff. And he'd come over and talk to me and ask me how things were going all the time, and kind of check in on me to see what things were going, and ask me if I need anything or anything like that. No, I'm fine, but we would stay in touch that way quite a bit. But I always knew that he was always looking over his shoulder to see how I was doing and things like that. And I had a kid in Staten Island named Chien-Ming Wang. Oh, yeah. And one night we were on TV in Staten Island. The Yankees were off and they did the minor league game. And he heard me go to the mound to talk to Chien-Ming. Well, Chien-Ming, of course, is from Taiwan, and he couldn't relate very well. But I had a way of talking to him to relax him and make him laugh. Well, they had me on microphone. And he called me after that game and he goes, what language is that and how did you reach him? I go, I don't know. But me and Chien-Ming, we had a tremendous relationship, and he would call me and he'd bust my chops about that. And even when the kid moved up a little bit, he goes, I want you to call that Wong kid and talk to him. And I said, okay. So I would, and things like that. So he knew what I was doing down in the minor leagues. He kept an eye, but he didn't really come really forward to me or anything like that, but he just kind of nourished me along and would check in on me periodically here and there.
Well, Staten Island sets up a great segue because when Joe Torre left the Mets, he was eventually replaced by George Bamberger, guy who had been the pitching coach for those great Baltimore Orioles teams, one of which the Mets beat in the 1969 World Series, of course, and also was famous for, back in his day, the old Staten Island sinker, which had, somewhat different connotation to people within the game who knew what it was, and it wasn't just a straight old sinker, was it? Did he have any kind of an influence on you as far as pitching is concerned? And did he teach you that Staten Island secret.
No. There wasn't any of that going on. No, I stayed away from all that stuff.
Statute of limitations, come on.
No. I stayed away from all that stuff. There was nothing going on there in that regard at all. No, absolutely not. No.
There's a story. Tell me if this is true or not. That when no, this doesn't involve you. This is more generic. It actually involves George Bamberger.
Okay.
That things weren't going well early in 1983, and he had to be coaxed into managing the team anyway by Frank Cashin, who'd worked with him in Baltimore. So George managed 82, 83. The team was really struggling about the beginning of June, just a couple of weeks before you got traded. Do you remember how he told you guys that he was resigning as manager?
No, I remember when he told us he was having heart problems, though. As I told some people just yesterday, we were speaking about this, and he says to me, the media, somebody asked him in the media, they said, what's going on with your heart? What's going on? He goes, well, let me ask you something. He goes, if you had to watch Neil Allen in the ninth inning every night, wouldn't your heart act up? So George was making a joke about it, actually, to a couple guys. Well, it made the papers. And he come and called me in the office and everything like that, and he goes, listen, I haven't been feeling too good as you feel. I have not been feeling too good, as you well know. And he said, I said something to a couple media people, and you're going to probably read it, because I hadn't read the paper that day or something. And I go, what's that? And he goes, I was just kidding. And he goes, you know how you say things off beat? And I go, yeah. And he goes, I said, if you had to watch Neil Allen, your heart would act up too. And I go, well, it's the truth. I wouldn't want to watch him either. And he just kind of laughed about it, and he just goes, well, I don't want you to get upset. I was only making a smart remark, and I didn't mean for it to get to the media. I go, George, it's no problem. And so, and then shortly after that is when he had to step down and Hondo came in.
Yeah, but there was a story, I seem to remember reading this, that essentially the way he told the team he was resigning was he went into the clubhouse, the guys might have been in LA, and he said, boys, I'm going fishing. And basically walked out of the clubhouse, and that was that. Does that ring a bell?
If I remember correctly, yes. I don't know if it was LA though. Was it LA? It could have, maybe it was West Coast somewhere. I want to say it was San Diego, but I do remember him coming in, and he had tears in his eyes, and we always used to know when he was upset or he was mad, because he got like a little Kirk Douglas dent in his chin right here. And when he was mad, you kind of stayed away. You knew it. But on that particular day, he had the floodgates up. It was very emotional, and he was trying to get through it the best he could, and he kind of cut it short. I think shorter than he anticipated it to be, and let us know that he loved us all. And he goes, things aren't going the way that we would have liked it to go, but I just want you to know that I appreciate the effort that everybody here has given, and that you've acted like professionals, and continue doing that for whoever's coming in here behind me. And we all knew it was going to be Hondo, but he cut it kind of short, and then that was the last time I really saw George Bamberger.
And really, 2 weeks or so later, you got the news you were being traded to the St. Louis Cardinals, along with a pitcher named Rick Ownby for some dude named Keith Hernandez. And it's interesting that younger fans who go back, I guess, about that far, and maybe didn't remember a lot about you pitching for the Mets, will always know that Neil Allen, yeah, that's the guy that was traded for Keith Hernandez. Does that haunt you a little bit when you come back to New York and people say, oh yeah, you're the guy that they traded for Keith?
Well, I guess it's better to be remembered for something, and so I look at it that way. Like my son and my daughter live in Long Island, and a lot of their friends say to them, your dad was traded for Keith Hernandez, to this day. And they're 34 and 38 years old, and a lot of their friends, and they'll have Christmas parties and things like that, and they'll say, your dad was traded for Keith Hernandez. Yeah, he was, So I guess with that being said, to be connected to something like that, it's good with me. I'm fine with it. Because if it wasn't for that trade, who the hell would remember me in New York? Why would you want to remember me in New York? In that respect, I was a big part of their '86 World Series. I think I got them a heck of a bat in the lineup and a heck of a first baseman. They never sent me a ring, but that's okay. But I always feel like I contributed to making the Mets a better ball club by that trade.
Well, you, believe it or not, contributed to some other people along the way too, because you've talked openly about some of the difficulties that you've dealt with in your life, dealing with alcoholism and losing your wife suddenly, which are obviously devastating situations. But you've talked about how you've managed to come through it. So Has Neil Allen found a happy, secure place in his life now, I hope?
Oh, absolutely. You know, like I told you earlier in the interview, that years ago, when you come to the major leagues, you're very immature. You do a lot of stupid things. And same in life. And as you get older and you're dealt these hurdles and things that a lot of people haven't been dealt, you have to ask yourself, okay, now what do I do? Take a deep breath, just like you did when you're on the mound. Step off. I've thrown 2 balls in a row. Well, now I've been throwing this. I need to step off and take a deep breath. And you regroup, and you learn. And you learn from your mistakes. Granted, I'm 61 years old. I'm still learning. But at the same time, it's a better learning pattern where I'm at now than I was when I was younger. And again, that was you do things for a reason that you hope that later on in life you learn from. And with that being said, I think I got my PhD in life now as I'm getting older from my youth.
Well, it's great to see you looking fit and happy, and you'll always be a Met, so it's great having you back here.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Neil Allen, our guest on One on One. I'm Howie Rose. We'll see you next time.